Welcome back, Pirate Crew. It's your captain, Yeehaw Yadam, and for today's video, we have the long-awaited market watch for Set 2 of One Piece. It's finally no longer the pre-release window on TCG players, so it's a free-for-all on the TCG market, and prices have been shifting up, down, and in all sorts of directions. So it's going to be really interesting, but before we get to that information, I want to let you guys know two quick things that happened this week in the OP TCG. Firstly, the treasure cups. The treasure cups are back. If you guys didn't have the opportunity to play for them in person, I get it. You didn't either have a deck, maybe you're newer to the game, you coming into the game in Set 2, or you just didn't have the financial means to travel. Perfectly understandable. But guess what? Now you have access to those cards because these events, this treasure cup, will be completely online. All of the events here are online venues, meaning they're going to be taking place on some sort of Discord. They're going to be run by the same organizations that ran the in-person events. The most important information that comes from these treasure cups is the registration date. Registration starts on March 31st, midnight, the UTC time zone. Also be aware, Latin America, as usual, I guess, with these events, has the most amount of events starting May 6th, 13, 20, and 27. Every single Saturday in the month of May, we will have a treasure cup happening in North America, and then we have one happening in Europe on the 27th, one in Latin America on the 14th, and then one in Oceania on the 20th. So if you guys didn't get your chance to play for the very, very cool cards that are the Usopp, the Zoro, and the Chopper, let me go down here and let you guys see them real quick. Usopp for top 16, Chopper for top 64, and Zoro for top 8. Well, here's your chance. The only thing, as with all events, these sell out quick. So make sure to have your watch, your clock, whatever you have, your timers, your calendar set, so that you're ready to register for these events, guys. If they keep it at the classic 500 and something, 512 player cap, well, they might sell out pretty darn quick. So make sure to get your hands ready, your card information, your Bandai TCG information, so you can register for these events. And secondly, we have now an official release date for these sleeves. If you're interested in any of these sleeves, they will be officially released April 28th, which is a pretty good ways away. But most importantly, we have an official MSRP for these sleeves, which is $650. It's going to be $650 for either of these sleeves. There comes in a pack of 70, and just look at this Chopper. Hopefully, I'll be able to get my hands on it at MSRP, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. So without further ado, guys, let's go straight into the market watch. Firstly, we'll start with the pre-release cards. I wasn't really sure where these cards would land in Digimon, which is the game that I have the most experience seeing how pre-release works. Cards behaved in a very similar fashion that they did in One Piece. The very sought-after One Piece pre-release stamped cards were going to land in the $20-$30 range, everything else being in the tens, and then possibly over time just being dollars, cents on the dollar. But if you got your hands on a Makino, your hands on a Moby Dick, for whatever reason, a Dogora, but most importantly, a Curly de Dawn. There's a couple ones before Curly de Dawn, but I think this one is very worth mentioning. Then you got a pretty worthwhile card. If you're looking to trade it for some more card value, or if you want to keep it, maybe complete your collection, be sure that these are the prices that they're going to go for. The more playable pre-release cards are going to be in the 20s. Everything else, not so much. The only thing I didn't like about the pre-release cards, since we had no information, was that they were just gold stamped. It just says it's a common non-foil card that just says pre-release on it. Didn't like that one. I know Digimon over time in the first few sets, that's how they did it. Eventually they started making the pre-release cards foil. Let's hope that they do that for the future, but as of right now, the gold stamp isn't selling me on it whatsoever. But if you got one of these cards, you're looking to really max rarity your deck, the prices are there, baby. So OP02 boxes, how did this go up? We did a market watch 2 weeks ago thinking that 220 was too high, and now we're at 230. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. At its height, right towards Valentine's Day, it seemed, it was at $256. But we've steadily dropped to a range of 220, 230. It seems to have settled within that range. And what's unfortunate is that not only is that what people are reselling their boxes for, that's what LGSs are reselling these cards for. Down here in South Florida, it has been impossible to find an OP2 box below the price of $180. That is the cheapest that I've seen it thus far. Maybe if I went a little bit more north, I've heard people getting them at $100, which is rather reasonable. But anything other than $180 down here has been unheard of, which is rough. It's really rough for the community, really rough for players. I've heard a lot of players from OP01 unable to get product from OP02 and just being completely discouraged. So I hope that this gets resolved one way or another, moving into set 3 or set 4, or whenever they do another wave or whatnot. But hopefully these shipping issues, this stock issue gets resolved, because it's really crazy out there, guys. I see it on the Reddit and I see it in person. People are fiending for cards, and I hate using that word, but it's crazy. Let's talk about Ace. So Manga Ace settling at $1,000 is really high, much higher than Shanks. Now I get when OP01 came out, the cards were significantly cheaper, all of them across the board. Zoros, Namis, everything was about half of what they're worth now, and that kind of falls in line with what's going on with Ace. Shanks, when he on release, was like 400, 500, and then shot back up now into the 800s. Ace seems to be doing something similar, $800, $900 where he's sitting, and then he might even go up from that. I've saw people purchase this card in front of me for $1,000+, and yeah, it seems like that's basically where he's gonna sit. I do see some people selling them a little bit cheaper. If you look at the sales history, I'm pretty sure some have sold in the 800 range. 850 is where I was seeing it at, but I don't think it's dipped much further than that. Someone was able to grab one at 750. Congrats to you, good sir, apparently. But yeah, Manga Ace is holding a lot of value, but I think that's also in line with the boxes. Since the boxes are just so expensive, I guess because of that, in turn, the cards in them will also have an inflated value. Not great, but certainly something that we have to deal with unless they print more of this set, which I'm not necessarily sure at this time that they will. Newgate. Let's go with the leaders now. So we're going to do all the alt art leaders, a bit of the alt arts, the secrets, and things that I think is worthwhile talking about. So let's talk about the leaders. Starting from high to low, we have Edward Newgate. Edward Newgate sitting at $200. Now, during pre-release, or during the pre-release time slot, he was sitting at about $230. I remember, because I was trying to purchase this card off of people and no one would budge below $220. I mean, yeah, he's at $200 now, $195. That's not much of a budge in my opinion. I think that's pretty darn high for this card. Now, I know Zoro in set 1 got extrapolated from like $60, $120, $200. He did all those jumps before he ended up settling at a $200-ish. Edward Newgate might be doing something a little bit similar, right? People expect Newgate to be good this set and the following set, similar to Zoro. So they're basically baking in that price right out of the gate. We're not going to have, I don't think this card is going to go much higher, but I also don't think it will go too much lower, unfortunately. As someone who's very interested in acquiring this card, I don't really want to shell out $150+ on one altar leader, but it almost seems like that is what we're doing in this set, because if we go to the next leader, if you like playing black and you want to play Smoker, 175, baby. So the highest leader we have is around 200, then we have 175 for Smoker, which I do think Smoker is a good deck. After doing my 20-minute testing, playing a couple games with black, I think black is super duper cool. Is it $175? I don't even know what to say. There's a lot of factors that the more I look at these cards, the more I think that they're immensely overvalued. But there are factors that you could use as supporting evidence to why they're so high. Let's talk about those factors. Factor number A, we're in a regional format. We're about to go into a bunch of offline regionals in terms of the, at least in North America, that's the ones that I'm aware of. We have the Illinois and the Niagara Falls event, you know, that's going to cause cards to go up. With these online treasure cups, you can argue that that'll also drive cards up, as well as with the online regionals that are happening. All of those things are driving factors to push cards in a forward fashion. Couple that with low supply, extremely expensive product, and we're left with everything just being extremely expensive to compensate for all those other factors. Now, as with everything, if you guys are to buy these cards, use your money however you like. Obviously, it's your money. Do whatever you want. I'm not a financial advisor. But with everything, if you're trying to buy it off of a person in front of you, just understand that even though that the price we have here on TCG Player is $175, if I were to sell this on TCG, TCG would get a cut. They would get a cut of my sale. I'd have to ship it. When everything comes down, I'm losing about 15-ish% to TCG and then about like another $10 to shipping and tracking. So remember, whenever you buy these cards, if this is 175, try to talk to the person, be like, hey, look, I know it's 175 on TCG Player. Can you do like 145? Because after shipping and fees, and then maybe they'll be more willing at that point in time. You save them a hassle, you save yourself some money, everyone's happy. Just making you guys be aware of that. If for all of you that are not card game players, you haven't been card game players in the past, and this is your first card game, just know that when you sell, these prices aren't necessarily concrete. They're not set in stone. eBay, whatever form of website that you use to move products on the secondary market, they all take a cut. So make sure that you try to save yourself some money. If you want, obviously do what you want with your money. So that's what we got for the two most expensive leaders. We got Smoker and Edward Newgate, which if you compare them to Zoro and Law and Flamingo, they're already like $30 higher, $30 to $40 higher. Pretty significant. Then we got Sanji. Speaking of Sanji, hoo-wee, I got one. This card looks really cool. I ain't gonna lie. I don't think he's a great card whatsoever. It's sitting at $118 is bananas to me. You can argue Newgate, you can argue Smoker. They're both very competitive. But it looks like, and by what I'm seeing in these prices, competitive nature of cards is a big driving force for these prices. So therefore, besides the collectability, yes, Sanji is a straw hat. We have a lot of Sanji stands. He's a cool dude. Diabo Jumbo, let him cook. At the end of the day, he's a green-blue leader, making him a 4-lifer with an okay ability. It's kind of cool. Your deck is a bunch of vanillas. It's kind of interesting. It has access to blue, had access to green. Pretty solid. Is that competitive? Is that enough to keep its value all the way up at 120? Is the reason his value is so high because the boxes are high? I'm not sure. But if cards are valued at their competitive nature, Sanji is very overvalued. If these cards are overvalued, oh boy. So Sanji is very overvalued. I do see this card coming down a bit after we get some information from the online regionals, the in-person regionals. I don't think Sanji will be doing too darn good. And that's based off my understanding of what happened in the East. I think out of all of the lists that I've seen 3 Sanjis top. And they were at local tournaments. I do think he has potential. He's cool. I'm going to try to break him. But I don't have high hopes. I do see this card going anywhere between 60, 70 bucks, and that seems like a more reasonable home for our boy, for our chef, than 120. Then we've got Kinemon. Kinemon being pretty reasonable at 140 with shipping $145. Yep, he's going to be the new green leader. He has an Altar leader. Kid was the original leader, but we got Kinemon now. You can play Kinemon. He's really strong, overall crazy, going first, going second, offensive, defensive. He kind of does it all. And besides it being a competitive leader, this scene is pretty darn iconic. It looks pretty darn good. And the leaders are very hard to get. It's about, I think, 4 in a case. So understandable why his value is so high. Then we've got Ivankov sitting at $100. Now, he's dropped a lot. In the pre-release weekend, he was about 180. And he's tanked already to $100. It's a hard deck. Blue in general is really, really hard. And Ivankov is nothing to scoff at. It's a strong deck, but the fact that you're constantly at 0 to 2 cards in hand, and then maybe you can Deathwing to like go to 4 cards in one turn, or Love Beam, it's pretty darn hard. And every time he does his effects, you're getting taxed heavily on your hand, similar to Black. But the shtick of being at 2 cards in hand, if you don't Perona, if you don't Flamingo, you don't really stack the top of your deck in a good way, you could draw 2 bricks and then just, you won't be able to sustain your characters. You won't be able to sustain your life. And if your opponent does a very big swing turn where they hit you in your life and you now have 5 cards in hand, if you don't have stage, you're not going to be able to dump your cards. You're not going to be able to go to 0. You're not going to be able to trigger your leader's ability. So your leader, more often than not, is a vanilla. How good that is, I'm not necessarily sure. He is fighting with Crocodile and he's fighting with Doflamingo as the blue leader. And honestly, the more I see Crocodile and Flamingo, Flamingo's looking pretty darn good. Ivankov is not a bad leader by any means, but he is fighting with some other very strong competitors and his game style is not very intuitive, and because of that I can see why he dropped. Will I consider him dropping some more? Possibly. I don't think this is his lowest point. He could hit a little bit lower before he starts seeing a bit of a rise. I'm not sure what the lowest that this card will go is, but expect some pain on the Ivankov. At least that's what I think. And then lastly, we have our Monkey D-Carb sitting at $85. I'm interested in getting him mostly because I like him, But in terms of competitive nature, he is tough. It is what you want from the black deck, which is a control-y slow deck, but as a 4-lifer without the aggression from the red side. The color combinations are really good because red and black are probably going to be very popular colors, but they don't really mesh well. Cost reduction and destruction based off of stats, they aren't the same, and they really do not go hand in hand. But, you know, regardless of the fact that Garp has a good effect, it's just very clunky, to say the least. You have to play cards that not only dunk from your hand, but you have to play the reducers. I don't know. I don't know where this card can go. I don't want to talk down about Garp because I do have a Garp 20-minute testing coming out this week, and I had a lot of fun. Thought the deck was pretty darn good. But in terms of a competitive nature, it's not the easiest to pilot deck. It is a 4-lifer in a hyper-aggressive format, so it is going to be tough. I do think Garp might go a little bit lower before if someone finds a very good Garp list that'll surprise us all. I do think that could happen, and then he can go up. With more support, all the dual color leaders become increasingly stronger because they have a better card pool. So I always like getting the dual color leaders because I do think they're a good future investment. But at this time, in terms of competitive viability, I think Garp's price is starting to reflect that. I think he was $150 during the pre-release, and now he's steadily at like $90, and I only see him going lower from there. Very much like the first set, the leaders that weren't as competitive tended to go on the lower side, but the fact that he is a, I want to say main character, but a very loved character in terms of he's the Monkey D, will that carry him to a higher value? I'm not sure. I am sure that if he had his little dog hat on, he'd be much more expensive. And then we've got Zephyr. This pricing doesn't make any sense because I think Zephyr is very, very playable because this color combination makes sense. He has a very defensive ability, the when attacking Dawn -4 to destroy or KO a character. Really, really good paired with the Kuzans. And as well as you have the black cost reduction with the purple destruction effects like King. So you have a good little pairing right there. If you have a 4-drop Kuzan, you swing reduce by 4. That puts anything in the 6-drop King range, which is really, really good spot removal with cards that have fantastic stat lines. Not only that, you have access to crazy Baroque cards like Hell's Judgment, Blast Breath, Thunder Bagua. You have access to 2Ks from purple and from black side. I think Z is going to be a very, very strong deck. And if we're doing cards based off competitive nature, him being on the lower end of leaders is kind of troll. The card also looks kind of cool. I guess he's not a fan favorite because he was only in one movie. Zephyr's a cool guy. He is a little lost in the sauce, but he ended up being a cool guy in the end. And lastly, we have Magellan. Oi, oi, oi. So if this is how low leaders can get, that's interesting, right? Because Magellan, people are just throwing him away as a toss-away leader, but I don't think he's that unplayable in comparison to some of the other leaders on this list. I think he has some pretty good typing. The fact that he's impel down, the impel down cards are very, very solid. I don't know. If this is how low leaders can get, I'm just interested to see where the other ones can go. Because if I can get this Garp for $40, I'll be very, very excited. I think Magellan for 40 is a good price. I don't think he's going to be a meta-breaking hero. He's combating Kaido. He's combating King. He's combating Z. So he's combating other very strong, very powerful leaders. And because of that, I think he's taking a dive. That's the same idea that Emperor Ivankov had. And Kinemon, the reason that he holds up such a high value is because he's actually just so good. He's fighting with Eustace Captain Kidd, and he's still holding value. So that means he's an exceptional leader. And I get it. $40 for Magellan seems reasonable. Let's just see how that affects Monkey D. Garp and Sanji in the long run. Then off to the Altart. There we go. Off to the Altart Secret, we have Kuzan. Kuzan at $100. Yeah, that's expensive, but he's very necessary in the black decks. If you're playing Z, he's necessary. He's only not necessary, funnily enough, in Garp. So Garp ends up being a little bit cheaper because you don't really need the Kuzans, but this card is exceptional. Very, very strong, which is funny because Uda, even though when it was pre-release time, this was $200, has fallen significantly, and Kuzan has taken its place. This is why I'm starting to believe that cards are now being priced and valued at their competitive states. Makes a lot of sense, right? If this Uda is 60 bucks, this card going to be going down. Not a bad card by any means, but I think it's being held up by it being Uda. But other than that, the Kuzan, 3, 4 of in this set, depending on your deck, and in the following sets, 2 to 3 in your black deck. So a very playable card, playable in the future, whereas Uda saw no playability in this set or sees any play in the following set, starting to make it seem like cards are valued, you know, where they should be. And then we have the SRs. We're going to start off with Edward Newgate. Edward Newgate sitting at 120 bucks. This card is pretty darn good. If you've ever cast the Edward Newgate card, I get it. He's very, very strong. Fantastic top end for any deck with a red stat line. You can play it in Zoro, you can play it in Garp, you can play it in Law, you can play it in Luffy, you can play it in other Luffy. So he's really solid top end. You can play it in Whitebeard, but there is a solid debate about that, but we won't get to that in this video. But this card is really, really good. If you're ever able to have the momentum in your favor, the tempo in your side of the board, and you slam a 9-drop, it's like slamming a nail in the coffin. Many mirrors, many red on red action is going to come down to Whitebeard into Whitebeard into Whitebeard. If you haven't seen a lot of the meta from the East, you see it very often that the game doesn't end on the first Whitebeard, but the second or the third might just be what, you know, breaks the camel's back. So very, very strong card. Playing it at 4 seems rough, but unnecessary evil because you have to see this card as it is so powerful. We don't really have a searcher for it besides the Whitebeard Pirates card, but you're not going to really run that unless you're playing Whitebeard, and Whitebeard doesn't really run him. So gotta max out on him. And I think that's the idea that people are having with him. But if you see too many of him in succession early, you're in for a bad time. But the art looks fantastic and the card is exceptional, so I'm down with his price tag. Then we have Kuzan. Unbelievably unbalanced. One of the best black cards that exists next to basically all the admirals. Kuzan, Borzolino, Sakazuki. Beautiful, gorgeous cards. Besides how they look, they're actually just good cards. Good cardboard. In this set, all the topping lists from the East played 4 of this Kuzan. In the following set, all the topping sets play 4 Kuzan. An ability that says on play draw card being to immediately able to replace itself with a 5k stat line and a fantastic when attacking effect. Yeah, that couples up to make a very, very good card. The fact that Navy doesn't really have a searcher is mitigated by the fact that you just have to play 4 of this guy. So you really do want to see him. And not only do we want to see our $60 Kuzan, we want to see our $50 Sakazuki, as well as our Borzolino sitting at 60 bucks. All of the admirals faring at different values, but they have dropped significantly. This Kuzan, I believe, was 100 bucks. This was closer to like 80, and then this was also like $100. So a lot of these cards have come down 40%. That's fine. We can see them go down maybe a little bit more. I do think that these cards, again, based off TCG player trading that I spoke of earlier, if you get these at 15% off, you go a little bit off on the shipping, you can get these cards for about 50 a piece, 40s a piece off of players. That seems like a pretty reasonable number in my opinion. And honestly, these cards are so powerful. If you haven't played the black deck and you cast the Borzolino for the first time, or a Sakazuki or a Kuzan, I promise you, they're just unbelievably unmatched cards. Very, very powerful. And if you expect to play black now or in the future, whether it be Big Mom, whether it be whatever sort of black combination deck, these cards are going to be very, very good to your game plan. Then we've got Nami. I'm not sure how I feel about these cards. I want to mess around with the film cards, but definitely I'm going to try to play her in her regular form. And if she manages to be a very good and exceptional card, then sure, I'll go ahead and go out of my way to get the alt cards. But these cards didn't really do much in the East. They're very hard to build. And it's at the end of the day, it's a little clunky. The film cards are a lot of vanillas. We have this Searcher Nami, which is pretty good. Her coloring is good. Her typing in terms of film and Straw Hat is good. But I'm not necessarily sure what deck she fits in. She could fit in Red Green Luffy. She can fit in Eustace Captain Kidd. She can fit in Law. But do I really want to go this game plan, or do I want to keep up with the Supernova, Straw Hat, Wano, like with those game plans, which seem to have just a little bit more support and are a little bit more consistent? Not necessarily sure. Her being $60, super interesting. I mean, during pre-release, she was sitting and holding 150 easily. I saw this card being sold at $100, $120 all weekend, but that just seemed really high to me, and respect to anyone that purchased it at that price, because it was a very high risk, right? Because if the film cards don't do well, then we'll see card prices like this, and I don't know if they will or if they won't. It's gonna definitely require a lot of testing, and we'll see, I guess, after the online events. These cards are gonna be very volatile. This card, the Monkey D. Luffy, because if someone tops with the film cards, they'll propel them up. If no one tops with them, they will just... But the fact that it is Nami and it is cool art, she's Straw Hat, she's cool, she's doing that, you know, might be reason enough to keep the card. But I do see this card just continuing to plummet, as it just is going to be very hard to fit this in a very specific competitive deck. And based off the East, there really aren't any results to back it up. Then we've got our Marco. Marco at 50 bucks, Pog Champ, dude, for you Whitebeard enjoyers. Yeah, the leader is like 200 bucks, but Marco being around 50 bucks seems reasonable. This card is turbo unbalanced. Turbo unbalanced. It is a blocker, an attacker, and a card that just cannot be removed from the board. One of the reasons that Whitebeard becomes so oppressive next format is because they get another Marco. And Marco being a card that just cannot easily be removed is ridiculous. The fact that that combos so ridiculously well with the Moby Dick is that you can play this card for defense for a long portion of the game, and towards the end of the game, after you've defended, you now turn him into a 7k attacker, and he just, without any Dawn investment, is a 7k attacker that cannot be KO'd. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. His effect is even further that cannot be KO'd, because Borzolino says cannot be KO'd, but this card says actually cannot be KO'd. You can pitch bonus Moby Dicks, you can pitch bonus Seaquakes from your hand to just keep him alive, because his effect is not once per turn. As long as you are at 2 or less life, he just keeps coming on back. Very strong card. It being $50, honestly, pretty good price, and I might be picking up 4 very, very soon at this price point. Seems solid. I don't think it can go much lower than this, maybe $45, but it's about it. Even a 50k sale store is selling it at 56 bucks. Exceptional. Very solid price. Then we've got Buggy. Buggy's beautiful. That seems like an interesting sentence, but the card is fantastic. If you've seen this card in person, the foiling looks great. The pose is good. Buggy is a really dank character from the show. And Impel Down, if it continues to get support in the future, might be a very good card to have in your deck. Not only is Impel Down blue, can also be purple. It can be in any other color combination. If you get a leader that's Impel Down with the dual colors that include blue, you will definitely include Buggy in your deck. This is a fantastic searcher. The art is amazing. It has counter. It's basically a Nami, but it's not a Nami. For the Impel Down Buggy Pirates archetype. And once we get Buggy Pirates, we're gaming. But I think this card is going to be very, very interesting. I see it at 30 bucks. Seems like a ridiculously good valuation for this card. Over the pre-release weekend, he was sitting at $90, so he's dipped towards 30% of his original value. That's a good time to buy a card. Can it continue to go lower? Surely, but 30 bucks seems pretty reasonable for Buggy. More than reasonable, actually. I wouldn't say it's a steal, but it's good. Monkey D. Luffy. Yeah, he's a main character, and the card's good. Why is it 40 bucks? I'll take it. If you're interested in playing the Ivankov deck, it just seems like all the Ivankov cards just like got a strong pullback. So if you're interested in playing Ivankov and you want to play alt arts, you got a really nice price points for all your cards, right? Your Buggies are in the 30s, your Luffy's like 40, and then lastly you've got your character Ivankov being in the 30s as well. You can basically get the whole deck in alt art significantly cheaper than other decks. With that being said, do I think this card can go lower? Certainly. Just like this, everything is at a very weird standpoint. These cards are all held up by the idea that Ivankov is A, not that great, and B, very hard to play. But if Ivankov starts getting reps, starts getting wins, all of these cards can go up. Every single one. So if you are interested in these cards, make sure to pick them up. If you're interested in the Ivankov archetype, which I think is really, really, really cool, and in a good skilled player's hands is frightening, look into these cards. They're very, very well priced. well priced. I guess in comparison. And then one of the last cards we have here is a Monkey D. Luffy sitting at 23 bucks. I offered someone on pre-release $25 for this card. The card was going for 70 at the time, but I told him, based on what I think the card's going to be, I think it's like a solid 25er. And he's like, yeah, I'll try to sell it for 70. And I'm like, good, more power to you, but I'm glad that I was all right in my evaluations. A lot of the cards that I picked up, which weren't many over the pre-release, they've settled around what I thought they were going to settle around. This Luffy being around 20 bucks seems about right. And lastly, we've got the Magellan, which is 25 bucks. This card is super duper playable. 25 bucks. Like, I think he's more playable than this Luffy, and he sits a little at the same price point. It's kind of crazy. I think people are sleeping on purple. The purple archetype in general is very, very strong. But only time will tell. We're going to have to see how this format shapes up. I know that was a very long video, but we've got a lot to cover. It's a lot of speculation right now, and it's all based off the ideas that A, we won't have more product, and B, product is just hella expensive. So because it's really, really expensive, it's really hard to evaluate what the cards do in terms of a competitive or a collector's market, because it's all up in the air. It's all up to what happens in these events. And if we, our metas usually shape up to be very similar to the East, and based on that, prices are pretty reasonably, set towards that, or the prices already feel like they're baked in. There's not really much movement. I don't expect much movement unless something happens in the very near future. But if you guys like this sort of video, make sure to leave a like down below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, it was a lot. There's a lot to talk about. And if you quote something I say, please leave a link to the time slot, because sometimes I say things. This is a 30-minute video. You cannot expect me to remember what I was referring to. So please leave a little time stamp, and I'll make sure to, talk about what I was thinking when I said what I said, I guess. And as always, guys, if you haven't joined the Pirate Crew and are enjoying the comment, consider subscribing and joining the Yeehaw Crew today. And I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.